ashore. And we can't help but have that perspective because we're terrestrial creatures. Also, I'm very glad we're talking about oceans in the plural because there are several of them. And I don't just mean several bodies of water in different places, but there's and the seabed, and the water itself, and its surface, each of which has different sets of interests, different sets of actors, different sets of everything. And to treat them as though they're the same thing or somehow interchangeable. From the beginning, I think it's important to be careful in our language and be careful about which parts of the ocean system we're talking about. And recognizing the ocean system is in fact part of this Earth system, and one can't treat it as a separate thing because it's not. As well, something else which is becoming more visible are the oceans themselves, that we're now, and did not from the beginning of this project talk about or think about the oceans. It's something which is not unique to this project. It's something which is happening in many different fora. In IUCN, there was discussion just this last World Conservation Congress of creating an Oceans Commission, which they didn't do for a number of very good reasons, because oceans are things which cut across all the work of all of the commissions. It's not something which exists as a separate standalone object, but they are becoming more visible. And there's something about the invisibility of the ocean as a governance object, and the systems which have developed over time to govern its surface, to govern its water, and to govern its seabed, in which we might find different forms of governance than that which we found in terrestrial settings, precisely because, for as large as they are, they involve smaller communities of practice. And so there may be some ways in which we can take mechanisms we found in the terrestrial side, look at how they've appeared in the ocean side, and find a cleaner, purer version of them, which can then give us inspiration to rethink about how we think about terrestrial governance. And so I think and as well, we have an emerging ocean, the one that has previously been covered by ice in the north, with its seabed and with its water and with its surface, each of which has their own governing changes in governance. And so with those suites of things, I think it's a very rich field for us to be working in, and I'm glad we're doing it. Last thing, when I was a child and learning about oceanography, they described the state of our knowledge of the oceans as though one were floating over the Amazon in a hot air balloon and dropped down a bucket and picked it up, and that which came up in the bucket was that which we could talk about our knowledge of the oceans. And this was 15 years ago, and I don't think our knowledge has really advanced that much since then. And so the presumptions we have about knowledge of the ocean, which science, the idea of an oceans expert, with all respect to all the ocean experts in the room, is kind of a weak notion. Because there's the volumes of things which we can't know and won't know in this world of uncertainty, and governing in this context of uncertainty is that which characterizes the oceans. So thanks.
Thank you for that. Like your enthusiasm. Yes.
David Simmons, Institute of International Relations, Trinidad. I'm a social scientist, not a scientist. And I mean, I say that because, I mean, I think when we're talking about trying to bridge that gap, I hope I can add something to the discussion, the discourse debate. When I start to think of the ocean, I think in terms of what the law of the sea gave to coastal states. That is, it said that you have sovereign rights to explore and exploit the natural resources. And if I start from that premise, what I'm hearing here today, it does not seem to address and include any of those kind of things, which how they're going to be of benefit to the coastal state in terms of the exploitation of the resources within that exclusive economic zone. So I guess the question is, I mean, are we moving away from trying to ensure that science is used to enhance and improve the lives and benefits of people? And if it has moved from in that area, then to what extent then you probably should be thinking more in terms of what are the kind of economic benefits? How do we go about trying to look at it from a different perspective in terms of what kinds of economic benefits that's still possible within that exclusive economic zone area, which can then be utilized to the benefit of the coastal states. And to some extent, it's carrying on from what my colleague Michelle Scobie talked about. But I think the things that she made reference to, the things that would occur outside of that exclusive economic zone. I'm interested within that exclusive economic zone because I still think that what we see happening is that the private sector have identified several areas of opportunities which they have exploited and continue to exploit. We take, for instance, just cruise tourism, you know. This is an activity that takes place primarily within the exclusive economic zone of the coastal states. But they benefit in a very small way. The question then is, how do we take that on? So if we look at it from the perspective of, I think, more a developing country perspective, and we look in terms of the Caribbean Sea, or we look at the whole west coast of Africa, the extent to which you have a lot of illegal fishing taking place and so on. These are areas where I think there is still room, a lot of room for improvement in terms of trying to ensure that the activities that take place within those waters are harnessed to the benefit of the coastal state. So my thing is, let's see how we could use science to improve the lives and benefit of the coastal states, or persons, members, lives of people within the communities that exist within that whole area.
Thank you. Let me pose another question to you. Louis, in his very opening comment, said, well, maybe we need to pick some problems, land-based pollution, overfishing, and so on. And that certainly is one useful strategy. But I'm wondering whether there might also be some advantage in picking some kind of spatially defined areas and looking at how various activities and problems interact with each other. So, for example, there's fishing, there's offshore oil and gas development, there's in some cases dredging, there's marine, there's commercial transportation, there's the impact of land-based pollution in the form of, say, dead zones and that kind of thing. And so you have a kind of a common sort of spatial area, the Caribbean, whatever it may be, and part of the problem, it seems, that we're confronted with is how to deal with these sort of multiple human activities which impact each other quite significantly and therefore raise all kinds of problems about governance, where one solution is marine zoning, but that may work in some situations, but it doesn't necessarily solve some of these other problems. So, not to say that there's, I'm not ever being critical about picking certain kind of substantive issues, but I'm wondering whether there may not be an opportunity from a governance point of view of trying to really focus in on some of these regions or areas where there are multiple things going on which have more or less significant consequences for each other, and where our tendency to build regimes which are sort of functional or issue specific then fail to provide us with mechanisms for figuring out how to sort out these kind of interactive problems. We have another 10 to 15 minutes, and these have been extremely interesting. I wonder if we can spend the last bit of time. For Louis?
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, maybe you can fold into that. I'm just going to say, before we finish, I wanted to sort of bring us back to the sort of practical questions and Ruben's sort of suggestion about a task force or whether they're, I mean, there's been, I think, my reading of this conversation is that it has sort of affirmed the notion that there is an important subject, there is an important sort of issue domain of oceans governance. And so I'm interested in whether we can sort of arrive at any conclusions or ideas of this. We're not voting or anything, we're just some ideas about kind of practical ways forward. But Louis, you want to know?
Well, I'll try to, Bill, I think it's